So the idea that you start this thing and it flies, I used to play football. There's 4 quarters in football. That's like going to a guy and saying, hey, look, you only got to play 1 quarter. No, no, no. We got to go through the whole game, and it takes longer most times than people think.
Friends, welcome once again to Prosper, your 40-minute of business wisdom. I'm your host, Andreas Widmer, joined by my Sioka Center Executive Director, Rebecca Teddy. We're coming to you from the Entrepreneurship Center at Catholic University of America's Bush School of Business. It's a real honor today to welcome Brian Hamilton to the show. He is a leader who has shaped two very different worlds, financial technology and second chance entrepreneurship. In 1998, he co-founded Sageworks, one of the very first financial technology companies in the United States, long before Fintech was a buzzword. Sageworks was helping banks and credit unions analyze risk and make better lending decisions, using software and data in ways that were years ahead of the industry. Today, Brian serves as chairman of LiveSwitch, a cutting-edge video communications platform powering everything from telemedicine to live events. Again, ahead of the curve, made this before COVID, and when video platforms became essential, he started that long before that.
Now, he's also equally known for his mission, which has to do with kind of the theme of the podcast this year, or this season, which is giving people with criminal records the opportunity to rebuild their lives through business ownership. And so he founded a project we'll talk about later in the show called Inmates to Entrepreneurs and the Brian Hamilton Foundation. And he also stars in a national TV show, which we didn't talk about that at lunch at all, Brian. So we'll get to that. We'll talk about Free Enterprise, which helps formerly incarcerated entrepreneurs launch real businesses with real futures. And so he really embodies, Brian does, the key themes of this podcast, Prosper. He embodies innovation and courage and belief in people and attention to their dignity. And so we welcome you to the show, Brian Hamilton.
Yeah, it's great to be here, guys. Wonderful. And the lunch was good too. So.
We'll just let people know. Most people are only listening, but for the few people on our YouTube channel, it's not that Brian doesn't read. It's that he's on campus visiting us for a CEO lecture this afternoon, and we stuck him in an empty office. So that's where he's coming from. But speaking of reading, Brian, maybe to prove the point that you do actually read, we always open with the softball question, which is, what are you reading right now that you love?
Well, I have to confess, Rebecca, I have to say this. I was an avid reader until I put a TV in my bedroom about 10 years ago.
Until you started.
That's the demise of Western civilization, right downhill. But I am reading. I will say, and I know I'm at Catholic University, but this sounds a little bit self-serving, but I do read the Bible every day. And I always contend that is literally the best business book that you could ever read. As you know, it has everything in there. We can talk about that. But I'm also reading a book called On the Brink, which is about Bobby Knight, the former basketball coach. One of my employees, unfortunately, said I'm a lot like him, so he wants me to read this book, and I'm about halfway through. So, but I don't read as much as I used to, although I do watch Netflix a lot. So,
Brian, to start off, just give us a bit of a background, where you come from, your parents, your upbringing. Where were you born?
All right, I was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut, Andreas, in 1963. I'll give you my age right up front. And my mom and dad were both from Bridgeport. Actually, my mom was from Stratford. And my dad got us out of that neighborhood pretty early. I can't remember exactly when, but Bridgeport, great town and all that, but a little bit rough. And we moved to Devon, Connecticut, which is part of Milford. And my dad, and I'll just keep it really brief, and we can kind of go deep if you want to. But my dad, he was the son of an Irish immigrant, George Hamilton, who worked, I think, at Bridgeport Brass. My dad did not graduate from high school. Later on, he got his GED, and he kind of sort of worked his way up. But, we started with basically nothing, or I started with basically nothing, and I saw him sort of progress. And I always say about my dad, I really learned the American dream from my father because we really started with nothing. My sister Susan got very sick when she was very young. It created a lot of scarcity, i.e., poverty, for probably the first 10 years of my life, approximately. But he eventually sort of got us out of all that. But I was kind of firsthand witness to what it's like to not have money. In fact, I don't know where you want to go with this, so just cut me off whenever you want. But my sister Susan got sick. She was a couple of years older than I am, and she got very, very sick. I think encephalitis and brain damage. We called it brain damage then. Now I guess it's special needs, but highly, highly special needs, and very sick. And my dad got hit with about $15,000-$20,000 worth of medical bills. And of course, in those days, there wasn't really a lot of insurance and all that. So it might as well have been $15 million, and we just didn't have money. And I'll never forget this because when I wanted to hang out with my dad, it's really true. He had to work 2 and 3 jobs, but on the weekend, I would have to go from, Bridgeport or, Devon, Connecticut down 8 miles. 8 miles in America makes a big difference. Down to Southport, Connecticut, the land of the Great Gatsby. You know what I mean? You got the big pillars and mansions, and I would hang out with my dad on the weekend. When I was 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, he would bring me, and he would do like odd jobs on these mansions, like raking leaves. In those days, we didn't have leaf blowers; we had to rake the leaves, and we would rake the leaves. And but I was very attuned to that very early on, and it really didn't register with me. I was just a dopey kid hanging out with my dad. You know what I mean? And it didn't register as much with me, but the disparity of environments and how somebody could grow up in one area versus the way we were growing up. And that, I mean, that really, Mike's, really, I won't get into it too much, but there's a book being written about me now. And really, I have to go back and revisit these things with my sister Susan, and that experience with Susan and going through that and all the really, putting it in a technical term, the crap that we had to go through of getting your water turned off and your heat turned off in the middle of the winter. There wasn't really a big social security net in those days. That formed so many things for me. So that gives you a little bit of background on kind
Yeah,
of how I,
that's
yeah,
where I want to go with it. Is that so? It's in that context that you show up where, at what university, or did you go to university, or how did you start your adult life in that sense? And I want to say it's in that setting, like you knew what wanting was. Yeah.
I did. But it's funny. Again, I have to be careful because guys like me always claim to be rags to riches, and sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. But I always have to be careful around poverty because even though we didn't have money, I don't feel like I was ever poor because I had a father who cared about me. You know what I mean? And that very important. I had coaching, but we had a lot of economic, um, depression kind of. I think poverty is not really an economic disease. I think it's a social disease, right? It affects every part of your experience. But making a long story short, my parents had never been to college, and I decided I was going to be a professional football player when I was about like 8. And I played from like about 8 to 18. And that was sort of it's important because there's an analog to this that goes into my education. But I was all football. I mean, that was it. I was play football. I was good, but by the time I was about 16, I realized that they weren't taking too many NFL players. I was good, who would run a 4.9 or a 5.0 40, as a receiver. So when I was about 17, I decided, hey, I need to not focus on athletics. I need to start studying. And I went to Sacred Heart University, which was, the guys over there get mad at me because I don't want to put it down, but it was basically a 4-year community college. It was everybody was a commuter, and I went to school there, and it was basically open admission. Is the truth. I mean, it's just the truth. And that's where I began my academic career. And of course, that changed the entire trajectory of my life. And I went to Sacred Heart. And then for graduate school, I went to Duke University, a little bit different of an experience, as you can imagine. And that's a little bit sort of about my early journey around education.
So we said in your introduction that you were one of the earliest, or you were on a cutting edge of financial tech before that was even a thing. How did you? I think you said you studied finance, and as an undergrad, and then how did that? Take us then from education into this wild world of financial tech.
Yeah. And by the way, if I don't get there, remind me how to get there because I might not get, I might not, I got to tell you, I might not get there. I was always doing entrepreneurship stuff from a very young age, very young. In the day, if you wanted to buy a Snickers bar, I think the price was about 11 cents, if you can believe it. But we didn't have any money. So I was always that annoying kid in the neighborhood knocking on your door, cutting your lawn. And it's actually incredibly important to my story because, again, I would see these guys in Southport, Connecticut or Westport, Connecticut, and, they seemed a lot happier. They had a lot more money. And I was like, that's for me. I don't want to have to live the way that we're living. So I started businesses. I was always running businesses. I paid my way through college. In fact, I even paid my way through Duke, which is a lot more expensive. And so I did all that. And then I get out of Duke in graduate school. And my first business, and I'm going to get to the fintech thing in a minute, I promise. But my first business was not tech. It was a coin laundromat. And I remember calling my dad about it. My dad hadn't even gone to high school, and he's like, what the heck? This kid's going to Duke. I got this crazy kid, which is true. Now he's going to go start a coin laundromat. But see, there was a reason. I didn't have any capital. So I did it, and I built that company, little company, up to like 5-6 stores, and I sold that chain, Rebecca. And then I used that money to fund Sageworks, which was the fintech company. Now, getting to your question, which I do remember, how did that happen? I had a buddy, Sarah Torville, and I met her back in the early 90s. And I had an idea for an expert system because I'm leaving out some, sort of professional development stuff. But basically, I had an idea of a system that would convert hard to understand numbers to easy to understand or simple language. Because a lot of people who, get balance sheets and income statements and financial stuff, they don't understand what it means. And I ran that by Sarah. We were buddies, so we were just talking at night. And good friend of mine. She doesn't like when I give her age, but and I won't, I guess. But she's about 20 years older than I was, and she's like, hey, Bri, you ought to try this expert system that we've been talking about, beating around about. And I was like, I'm not ready for it. But at a certain point, as Andreas mentioned during the intro, I was like, yeah, the coin laundromat stuff's pretty good. I could see how that movie ends, but I want to go do something maybe a little bit bigger. And that's when I started Sageworks in 1998. And, we claim to be the first fintech. And, what's a fintech? I don't even know what it is, but we really, I think we might have been, we executed over the internet right in the beginning. I think this small little dinky company called Salesforce and Sageworks started almost exactly the same time. And we both executed our software over the internet. And, if the truth is this, it was kind of like, hey, let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens. But then you get into, okay, well, who are we going to sell it to? And there's a whole journey to that as well. But I think it's important. I think it's very important. I don't know who the audience is, maybe the kids, professors, who knows, right? But it's very important that I really don't think there would have been a Sageworks if I hadn't been an entrepreneur very early, because I learned the basics of business, build a product that works, service your customers like crazy, and do right by them, and sort of the basics. So that's kind of my journey as to how I got into Sageworks, and then, of course, built that into a much larger company.
Did you enjoy it? When you started, it must have been like hair on fire crazy.
Yeah. What's the truth? When you do these formats, guys, I always promise myself I try to attempt the truth. You know what I mean? It depends on the day. when there was no one in the world doing what we were doing, literally no one. And frankly, I think for good reason, because there wasn't any demand, you know what I mean? We had to go create demand. So it was incredibly hard, Andreas, for the first 10 years. You got to realize I was in that business for 20 years, but literally 99% of the value accrued in the last probably 8 years. So we sold. I mean, I went out, drove cross country. I sold to this little outfit called Intuit. We had a deal with Wells Fargo, BNA. I sold to this tiny little bank called Citibank. I literally went and pitched to Richard Sable, who's still a friend of mine, and they bought it. But my point, I want to answer your question. During that time, and Andreas, we talked about it during lunch. You see, the thing is, if you're doing anything new, anything, you're going to get a lot of no's, a lot of rejection, and it leads. It's kind of depressing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
isn't
I
it?
got to, yeah, it really is. And so, yeah, yeah, I enjoyed it later on a little bit more than when I felt like we were sort of spinning our wheels, and very stressful, very low capital. Now I love being an entrepreneur, a lot of great memories, but I think we do a disservice to our listeners, to the people trying to learn to say, "Oh, it was wonderful, and I loved it, and I had a mission from God, and I had." Yeah, some days, but a lot of days it's like, "Hey, man, I took investment money. I got to pay these guys back," and you just go forward.
Depends on your definition. My answer would always be depends on your definition of what's fun. And so the fun of a startup is more in retroaction than in reality. In retrospective, you crave the adrenaline and the excitement also because you know how it ended.
Right.
So you crave it,
Exactly. That's
and it's
true.
it's
That's
like
true.
parachute sailing that you can only remember if you survive it. And so then it's an exhilarating experience. But while you're doing it, it goes almost too fast as for you to register whether you truly like this or not, because it's like running down a hill where your body is slightly faster than your legs, kind of thing. And so you're not quite in control. Were you self-funded? The way it makes it sound like now is that because of the coin laundry, you're self-funded, but that couldn't have carried you through.
So we were self-funded in the very beginning. Um, Never did institution money, and I never will, by the way. And I can get into that. Never did institution, never will. We did raise some money, but it wasn't really much. I mean, just to give you perspective, over that 20-year period, we might have raised $3 million in total.
Brian, so what I'm hearing there is must have turned on revenue right away. So when did you become like cash flow positive, or how quick? I mean, what do we talk about a ramp up? Did you run such a lean organization that you started to not need that kind of money?
Yeah, well, we did the radical thing, and it's very, very, it's a secret. Don't tell anyone. But we grew from cash flow. I know that's radical, but I've never believed in losing a lot of money, probably because I'm Irish and cheap. And also because honestly, I was never a great money raiser, is the truth. So yes, we be specific. By about 2008, we broke even. But between 1998 and 2008, our losses we kept small, and I grew the company as we got more customer adoption. And I got to say, I'm sure there are people who go out and raise $1 billion, and there are, and they do great. But usually the entrepreneurs lose their company, they lose control. What's worse is they have to do business with people, the Wall Street types, which we can talk about later. But basically, I've always believed in raising the money you need as your business proves itself rather than raising a pile of money. And I wasn't a really good money raiser, and I still stink at it, to be honest with you. So that's just the way I do things. Everybody does things differently, but I took a very conservative approach to building that organization.
I love that you're being so candid about that, because I think we talk to a lot of young entrepreneurs or people who are startups or incubating, and the different kinds of capital that you might potentially need. They don't, those things are not well understood, and it's good to have more than one model. So I love that you did that.
I think we do a disservice. I know we do a disservice to people when they're starting businesses to tell them that, hey man, you can't start a business unless you go get institution money. Now, number one, when those guys come in, right, they're going to take control of your company. What's one of the reasons you want to start your company? You want freedom. That's why you're doing it, right? That's why I do it. I want some freedom, right? That's number one. Number two is, you don't own a lot of the company. And Rebecca and Andres, I got to tell you, the road is littered. The road is littered with bodies of entrepreneurs. They take too much money. They lose control. When they sell the company, they don't make a lot of money, right? So I'm not a big believer in institution financing. No disrespect to Duke, and my wife, she's sitting here. She's a Duke graduate. She keeps telling me, "Don't stop saying nasty things about Duke. They accepted you." And I love Duke. When I say Duke, I mean the business schools, the Harvards, the Dartmouths, the
No, the
Dukes.
endowments. Yeah.
Or even just the standard way things are done. And it's so interesting that so often in the path of entrepreneurs such as yourself, part of what you seem to have is a certain freedom to just do things your own way and not do things the set way that you're supposed to. And that brings me back to my question I was going to ask you, which is, I'm always fascinated by people who have stories like yours where it took a decade to get traction. And we always talk about entrepreneurial risk, but I always am curious about, like, what makes you stick it out for 10 years or 12 years at something you don't necessarily love every single day. And was that the right thing to do? Or should you have cut your losses earlier?
All right. Well, let me answer the question, and then I'll riff. Okay. Fear. You see, I did this thing because of my old man. You got to remember, and thank you, Andreas, for asking about him. When my father was a young man, 22 years old, my sister Susan came into the world. She got sick. He gets hit with $15,000 of medical bills, and he paid it back. It took him 15 years. I lived it and saw it. Because all the friends were saying, hey, declare bankruptcy, blah, blah, blah. And my dad was like, hey, I basically borrowed the money from the hospital and I'm going to pay it back. And so this is at the risk of moralizing, right? When I took investment money, Rebecca, 3 million, 30 million, 3 billion, it doesn't matter. I feel like, hey, man, I got to go pay these people back because, Andreas, you know this because you started businesses. When people invest, they're investing in you. So fear, if I had the money, Rebecca, and the good sense, I probably would have gotten out of it way earlier. But once I took investment money, it was like, no. I got to get a return to these people. They believed in me. And that was a massive driver for me. Yeah, it's important. I mean, very important, and that's why this whole idea, and I don't know where it came from, it got invented over the last 10 years. In tech, we invent things, Series A and Series B and Series C and D and E. And I'm like, what the heck is that? That's just raising money.
It's so amazing looking back of your timing. Of course, part of this is providence, but you started right at the time. You were early on, and then the internet bubble came along, and in there is when people got tons of money just because they said they were going to do. Remember, they used to say, "Sell the invisible." Well, you never sold anything invisible. And then these companies, they come into 2000, and the bubble burst, and everybody's water's right above their nose. Not yours, is it?
Yeah. Well, I was a heretic. You know what I mean? I would have been excommunicated in the church. It was the year of 500 AD. In that radical idea, build a product with your hands, get it out, get some customers, prove your concept, make sure the customers use it, and then put money and grow it. And there are guys, and it's true, by the way. Like, I told you guys during lunch about this, but they're very good at this. They're great. I, you know, Syra always questions this. Oh, you're not an introvert. You're not a. No, no. It takes a lot of energy for me to do what I'm doing now. I'm happy because I think I can help, right? But I am not the professional money raise guys. Come in, they do a great PowerPoint. Boy, the future is great. There's no land there, there's no dirt or anything, but it's going to be wonderful.
There's no
And
there.
yeah, there's no there there. I'm not good at it. I'm not. I am. There are people who are way better at that than I am. And those guys, it's kind of funny down in Raleigh, Durham, in Austin. Sure, I'm sure in Silicon Valley, they go raise money. The company flops. They go do it again. They raise money. And my father would call them, and I know I can't swear here, but my father would call them BS artists. And I don't know if I am, but I always believe I want to show an investor, hey, number one, my money's in because I put my money into Sageworks. I mean, remember, it wasn't a lot; it was like 200K, but that was hard fought. That's from laundromats.
Well, that was the vast majority of money you had. You were all in.
Yeah. Oh no, all of it, literally all of it. And so the thing here's the thing is, and I hope we can convey this tonight a little bit. I don't know if we'll get there. I hope we can. There are Rebecca. I want to go on to the point about the 10 years and riff a little bit, right? Everyone thinks you start a company and whew, or you start a company and whew, it goes down. There's a percolation period in most businesses where, like boxing, I need to be in the ring. I need to be throwing the punch. I got to survive until my business concept gets proven out. For us, that was 10 years. It really was. And so remember that to the aspiring entrepreneurs. Like, you got to give yourself time. I read, and don't read the news. Please don't read the news. I read the news last week about these kids, 18-year-old kids. Oh, they started a business and now the valuation's 50 billion and they raised like, you know what? We do a disservice because even though that might be true, and of course they don't own their company and they don't know that yet, they'll find that out when they sell it. But even though that might be true, you see, that's an aberration. That is so rare. We want to teach to the vast majority of times where that percolation period is required to get the business going.
Let me pause our conversation here for just a second. We're just going to pause in our conversation with Brian Hamilton to invite you, if you are enjoying this conversation, to be sure to like us and to leave a great review or subscribe. It really does help. Or even better, our gold standard is organic growth. So if you would tell your friends, we would love that. Tell them that you want to introduce them to the most profound and encouraging and quick business podcast around. And to learn more about the show and the work of the Ciocca Center at the Bush School of Business, visit us at cioccacenter.com. That's CIOCCA center.com, or click the link in our show notes. We'd love your feedback and support. And now back to our conversation with Brian Hamilton.
Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Brian Hamilton. Brian, let's close the last topic, and then I want to switch into more this inmates to entrepreneurs, which is an absolutely amazing story. But let's first go back to the tech. What you just talked before the break about how people show everybody that everybody is Michael Jordan, but then when life actually starts, people still have to show up to work and actually make ends meet, and that we're not all the owner of NVIDIA. Did you want to close something on that?
Yeah, before I do though, and I just want to say this, Rebecca and Andres did not tell me to say this. I say what I want to say, but I'm going to throw it in. You guys can use it. Don't use it if you don't want to. But what I love about the program in entrepreneurship at Catholic University, people, is that they are very, very important. You go to I've taught all these universities, I mean, really all over the country. And what I love about what you guys are doing is you're teaching people the way it should be taught, which is the classroom plus going out and being an entrepreneur and go start your own business. So it's very important for people to know, yes, we can learn the academic side of it, but if we don't lace into that the real world experience, then we're not really doing a service in the education system in teaching entrepreneurs. I'm very passionate about it. So I'll put the plug in. You guys use it if you want to.
Thank you so much, Brian. That's gold, and actually that does dovetail right into talking about inmates to entrepreneurs. It seems to me, because part of the reason we have such an experiential approach to education is one of the things students need to understand is this can be done, right? There's a lot of poo-pooing our economy and a lot of naysaying and a lot of negative talk, and just the experience of, you know what, you can do it and I'll prove it to you. And it seems to me that's part of what you're doing. I think you'll have to tell the story, but that's part of what you're doing with inmates to entrepreneurs too. That where everybody else says, no, we won't hire you, you say, well, then do your own thing. You can make it happen.
Yeah, let me just real quickly, though, I want to go to this a little analog that Andreas mentioned about the NVIDIA. What a great question and what a great point. Remember, even that guy, and I like that guy, he's a smart dude, but even he talks about this, the amount of struggle that you went into for years before NVIDIA became NVIDIA. And that is the overwhelming experience of every entrepreneur I know. So the idea that you start this thing and it flies, look at, I used to play football. There's 4 quarters in football. That's like going to a guy and saying, hey, look, you only got to play 1 quarter. No. We got to go through the whole game. And it takes longer most times than people think. Now, with regard to I2E, yes, I started Inmates to Entrepreneurs back in 1992. And we didn't even have a name then, honestly. We were like Jesus just showing up in the village. We didn't, there was no neat name. You know what I mean? I think Christians got the name at Antioch, didn't they? I think. Anyway, my point is that I met Reverend Harris, beautiful human being. I'm a white Irish Catholic, second generation guy from Connecticut, and he is a Black Baptist minister from Oxford, North Carolina, i.e. the odd couple. And I loved being around Rev because he walked in the room, there's no electricity and the thing is light. And in my spiritual journey, Rev was incredibly important to my development, and because he did stuff, he was the real deal. And I would go around to the prisons with him. He did prison ministry, the Bible thumping at the prisons. I was 26 or something like that. And I just like being with him. And we went to 1992, I'll never forget it. We go to Orange Correctional Facility, and Rev's doing his ministry things, and there was a break. And a guy walks up to me, orange jumpsuit, the whole 9 yards. And I don't know what to say, kind of small talk. I said, hey, what are you going to do when you get out of prison? He goes, I'm going to get a job. And Rebecca and Andreas, it was at that moment, like literally that moment. This doesn't happen often. The light bulb idea, right, comes on. Like, hey, why are you trying to get a job when the system's against you? Go out and start your own business. And that's when I2E was invented. And then, and it's beautiful. It's still running. It's got an independent board, and we're in every state in the United States of America now. I always say it's the best business idea I'll ever have, and I never got a dollar. Shows you how good of an entrepreneur I am.
That doesn't mean it doesn't make a dollar. There may be very high return. It's just that it doesn't flow to you, but somebody does. But talk about the process a bit. First of all, it's just I'm just dying to know how you met the Rev. I mean, you a Catholic Irish kid from the north is going to the south and meets this guy. What's the odds?
Yeah, well, oh boy, yeah. So Reverend Harris, Rev was in the SBA 8A program, and I had for the SBA, and I had done some consulting in the SBA, and so that's kind of where I met him. Mabel Headstone Company in Creedmoor, North Carolina. So, and we just became friends, and the rest is history.
So he had a full-time job.
Oh yeah, he had a business.
Yeah, exactly. So he was a business guy, you were a business guy, but you were also both Christians, so you went to prison and ministered.
Yes, that's right.
And let me
Yeah.
understand how. So okay, so I come to you as an inmate, and I say, Brian, when they won't hire me when I come out. So help me. How do I start my own thing before I come out? But give me an idea of how this works.
I hope if I don't answer your question, tell me, please. All right.
Oh, I'll come
It,
back.
well, we go around to the different prisons, and they got us to know us so well. Sometimes they just let us in. I mean, but we would go to different prisons, usually minimum security, and we taught a 3-hour course in how to start a low capital business. How do you start a lawn service business? How do you start a painting business? How do you start a tree service? How do you start carpentry, plumbing, HVAC? And we would break, and it still do, and we break that down very specifically what you need to do to start that service business. And that, of course, now we have 8-week courses and all that stuff. But we that's what we did. We literally would teach them how to do that.
And then what they pick is up to them, or you give them some advice or some discernment, or what?
Yeah, usually they have an idea of what they want to do or be. But I always say, Andreas, and you know this, you're an entrepreneur, is that what what the person needs to come with is the desire to do it. You give me a person with some desire, and they really want to change, and that's very important. Very for every 10 people who come into our program, 7 will graduate, and half of those will start businesses. So, in baseball, we'd be in the Hall of Fame. You know what I mean? It not, not kicking field goals here, but we'd be in the Hall of Fame, about 35% success rate. But I've noticed that it's the people who are truly committed to changing that are going to be successful, and the rest are just mechanics. But we go low, basic stuff: how to print a business card, how to get your first customer, how do you get your first dollar, how do you service customers, and stuff like that.
I love it. The I'm asking you this because, as you know, we start a business with every student in our school here, and in a way, it's the same as prison, right? Because we have them for four
Don't tell,
years.
don't tell,
No.
don't tell the kids that.
We have
That's
them for
funny.
4 years, and they got to make a living outside. And according to the numbers right now, it doesn't look so rosy to be hired right after. And I think, and I read somewhere that your motto as well: if people won't hire you, just start your own company, right? And in a sense, that's sort of the idea that we have here with the Sageworks Center, that it's you Inc., right? And that you go off and do your own thing. Do you stay in touch with some of these entrepreneurs? And can you give me a couple of maybe some success stories of what you've seen?
Well, there's 2 guys that I love. I'll start with that right there. I met Lawrence Carpenter about, my goodness, might be 20 years now, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. He was a big time drug dealer in Durham, North Carolina, and I think he was in prison twice. He's now chairman of the board, and now remember, he did not go through our program. I want to be really clear, but but he came in as a mentor, but he started a cleaning business with like $100 with a bucket and some rags. And I love that story because, I mean, again, everybody thinks, oh, you need a ton of money. You don't need money. You need knowledge and you need desire. And I love his story because, he's done it, and now he's got like 200 employees. And as I said, he's chairman of the board. He's a friend. He's an incredible inspiration. And the second guy is Scott Jennings, who apparently I met in prison, which I did not. I don't remember that, but I've known Scott like 15 years as well. And Scott was in prison, came out, and started a business, and does he basically fixes gym equipment, that type of thing. And now he's got a thriving business, and he's also on our board of directors as well. But yeah, we stay in touch with people, and but honestly, and I tell my kids this, they don't like it too much, but I'm like, look, guys, I raised you from 0 to 18, 0 to 22 when you get out of college. At that point, dude, you're on your own. If I stink as a dad, I'm sorry. You know, what can I say? You're on your own. So yeah, we stay in touch with them, and Andres, we will recycle them into be mentors of our program. But we don't, we're hey, you know, you're a bird. We throw you out of the nest. We taught you how to fly, and we let you go.
Yeah, you sort of stop measuring everything. You just let them do their thing.
That's correct. Yes. Yeah, and that, of course, that works. I do need to mention something, and I'm going to mess it up. It's been a point of frustration, guys, for me for, well, I don't know, 30 years. Why do some people change and why do other people not, right? Why does that even happen? And I was turned on to this longitudinal, maybe that's the right word, longitudinal study that basically, and I didn't even know about this, because we found about a third of the people, we take credit for them, but I think they do fine without us, just to be honest. But but here's the thing. This longitudinal study I read said that about 66% of people in the world, not that they can't change, guys, but that they don't. And about 35%, they're open. Um, they want to get better. They're desperate for change, and they will change. So the real truth, we'll take some credit for teaching, but the people that are getting through our program, guys, are already apt to be willing to change. And so I can work with a player like that. But if you're closed and you don't want to change, and if you're in the 66%, forget it. Oh, there's a guy, by the way, I got to mention this. Rob was a drug addict. He was out in Los Angeles, comes out of Eastern North Carolina. Nice guy, big time. You got the drug scene. He went to L.A. I don't know why people go to L.A. or New York. Stay out of those places. But basically, he went to L.A., got into the drug scene. He worked for MTV, went to prison, and he's my hero. He works at LiveSwitch now. He works at our company. That guy's never going back. His attitude, he's open. And those are my heroes because they're willing to change, right? Look, and I know you guys probably don't want to get into this, but look at your faith journey, Are you open to change, right? Because I'm not better than Christ. And even Christ said that. Look, man, I can't, to the Pharisees, I can't teach you guys because you guys think you're experts, right? But if you're ready for change and you're open, then we can help you. But those guys are my heroes because can you imagine, especially Rob, I met his mother and his sister, very beautiful people, nice household, raised a very middle class standard way. And he goes sideways. But to go through that and get out and start your life again, that's amazing. My cousin Patrick, I say this, but my cousin Patrick, while I'm at it, he'll be mad at me now too. He was a drinker a long time. And I was around the fire a couple of weeks ago with him, and a big time drinker. And he almost died. Just he went sideways. Alcohol, drugs, all that. And he just stopped about 3 years ago. Now that's my hero versus a guy like me. Not that I haven't made mistakes. I've made some big ones, right? But it's always harder if you go sideways to get back on path. And so, yeah, I love what we do at IDE because I've seen incredible stories there.
And then you make a TV show. That's the sequence now. Tell us more about that. I have to say, I wasn't aware of it before I met you, but it is a super cool idea on many levels. One of it is it humanizes a population that is one of the few populations that's really looked culturally down upon, and people don't get a chance. And you're solving this in two ways. One is you give them a chance you help them get a chance, encourage them to get a chance by starting their own business, but also through the TV show, you make them very, very relatable.
How do we get away from this thing? It's overwhelming, right? How do we get away from this thing called God? How do you get away from how do you get away from that? In any serious conversation of metaphysics, philosophy, forget even about religion, right? We've got this thing called God. And I guess what I'm trying to say is what it's amazing to me, Andreas, that just to answer your point, that we're all made truly uniquely, and we all have a story, right? Really, a unique story. We're all unique. You got 9 billion people with all unique stories. How did that get created, right? So the point is, what can we pull out from that individual and their life? Every time I meet people now, I'm just amazed that, like you were working as part of the Swiss Guard for the Vatican, or I don't know exactly the titles and everything, and now you run into Pope John Paul, my favorite pope, and and your life changes. So I've just gotten more of an appreciation for what Cardinal O'Connor used to call the sanctity of life, the uniqueness of life, that each individual is different, it's just I'm just astounded every day. I mean, and I've really, of course, as you get a little wisdom, as you get older, you come to appreciate that even more.
About the wisdom, and that's one of my favorite things about getting older, is that I can promise everybody who's younger than me that wisdom does grow a bit, and it's a beautiful thing to start to see these patterns. But Brian Hamilton, I thank you so much for sharing this work with us. This is super inspiring.
Absolutely. It's great to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your time, Brian. And before we go, how can people connect with you, and how can they connect with Inmates to Entrepreneurs?
Well, you get a prize if you can spell entrepreneur, by the way. Good luck.
Yes.
So I'm gonna give you something easier. BrianHamilton.org, BRIAN Hamilton.org is the way you can reach me through my foundation. And on a serious note, we do have a website called inmatesToentrepreneurs.org. And we have a wonderful woman there named Allie, who's the program director. And you can reach us that way. We've reached, Rebecca, you know what happens? It's amazing. We get a lot of letters from the people who are in prison. By the way, judicial involvement does not mean always you're just in prison. In the United States of America today, if you got a DUI, if you got a failure to appear, you're judicially involved. You got a mugshot. Good luck getting a job. By the way, forever. Andreas, if you and I started, I'm putting a little plug in. Andreas, if you and I started a business and we went bankrupt, in 10 years in the United States, there's no record of it. If you went out, and you shouldn't do it, or I went out and I shouldn't do it, drank too much, got a DUI, you will remain in a Google search in perpetuity forever. Now, is that justice? I would say no. So anyway, that's how you reach me. And we get, I'm sorry, Rebecca, I want to go back. We get the letters from the mothers and the fathers and the brothers and sisters too. And it's wonderful to hear from these people. And I want to say this, and this doesn't go to people who are just judicially involved. Truly, don't give up hope. Don't give up hope. There's always a way to make something happen. And remember, because it sounds like such a bumper sticker, the legitimizing point to that is there's people who are willing to help. There's people who are willing to help. We're all sinners and we got problems and all that. But it's not just inmates to entrepreneurs. There's always people who are willing to help you. So if you're listening to this, or your mom or your dad, oh my goodness, my heart goes out to you. If your child goes through this stuff, there's always people who are willing to help. And please remember that.
Brian, thank you. Thank you for who you are, what you're doing. And thank you, listeners, for spending this quick 40, I think this time it might be 45 minutes or less with us. Take care, and until next time, in every way, we hope you prosper.